You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi guys, and thanks for coming back to the show while I'm actually out on a trail. This is Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis, and I am Mighty Blue. With a bit of luck, when this episode is aired in early August, I'll be pushing on towards Mount Whitney on the John Muir Trail. Well, that's the plan at least. I gave quite a bit of thought to what it was that I wanted to leave you all with while I'm away. I can't do a full show with a book reading and catching up with Katie while she's out in the AT, but I can give you an interview that informs you and hopefully entertains you along the way, giving you your hiking fix and, with a bit of luck, enriching your life. I've thoroughly enjoyed presenting the accomplished Strawbridges a couple of weeks ago and the remarkable Richie Holbrook. So this week and next week, we're going to have something a little bit different. Much has been talked about the positive effects of hiking on the state of a person's mental health, and it was clear to me, and I'm sure it is to many people who go out on these trails, that there are some people out there who are suffering from mental health issues, though most reported the beneficial effects that hiking had had on them. Indeed, several of our guests have alluded to it over the years. A few weeks ago, a lady called Barbara Weinstein from the Youth Mental Health Project reached out to me. She was hoping that I would highlight a hike that was already underway on the PCT. It was a guy named Jesse Cody who was out there in partnership with the Youth Mental Health Project and trying to raise $50,000 for them. The more I thought about it, the more I wanted to do a little bit more than just mention it on the show. COVID has brought issues over mental health, especially in the young, to the forefront of the conversation. So I asked about somebody coming on the show and said it'd be great if I could also speak directly with Jesse. Well, to cut a long story short, which I'm not really used to doing, that's what the next 2 weeks are going to be about. First, today, I've got Randi Silverman, the founder of the Youth Mental Health Project, and a woman who has her own story to tell about this issue. And you'll notice that I'm not my normal interrupting self in this conversation, because Randi answers my questions so fully and so clearly and articulates the issues so well that you can almost hear the gears in my brain clicking over as I learn a lot about a subject I know virtually nothing about. Then, next week, we're going to be speaking with Jesse himself, direct from the trail, and he shares his personal story, starting with what took him to a through hike of the Appalachian Trail, then led him to advocate so strongly and so coherently for mental health. When you've listened to both stories, I'm sure you'll feel that you've learned something. I certainly did. So that's what these next 2 weeks are about. First up, here's Randi Silverman. So I'd like you all to meet Randi Silverman. And first off, Randi is not a hiker. Well, she's not a big-time hiker, but she is associated with the Youth Mental Health Project. And that's what I want to talk about today, because trust me, there is some hiking involved. Hi, Randi. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Hi, Steve. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Well, it's a pleasure that's 20 minutes late, by the way, because
I'm so sorry.
Randi suffered Hurricane Elsa or Tropical Storm Elsa a few days after we did in Florida.
Yes.
And she's been clearing up a bit of a flood. So thanks for coming on in the midst of your flood.
Thank you. And I apologize for the delay. But, in life, things happen, and it's all about adjusting to the moment. And I think that's probably true in hiking as well as the work that I do.
Excellent segue, by the way. Very good.
Let's
go with that. Okay. Now, Barbara, one of your colleagues in the Youth Mental Health Project, reached out to me to help bring attention to a young man currently hiking the Pacific Crest Trail on behalf of the Youth Mental Health Project. His name is Jesse Cody, and he's had a history of mental health issues. I'd like to have the opportunity to speak with Jesse once he returns, but for now, can you tell us something about Jesse and how he's doing on the trail right now? Because I know he only just started recently.
Yeah, he's an amazing person, I have to say, Jesse Cody. He started what he calls a movement, which is called Hike the Good Hike.
Yep.
And it started because several years ago, he was really struggling with his mental health, and he came across a book about hiking. Oh, shoot, I've forgotten the name.
It's Walk in the Woods.
Yes,
it's
the Walk in the Woods book
by Bill
exactly.
Bryson.
I don't want to try too hard to speak on Jesse's behalf. But I do want to tell you what he has expressed to me. And because he was in such a bad state, that book inspired him to hike the Appalachian Trail. And he had never hiked before. He had never pitched a tent before. And he, on that hike, he says, saved his life. And it created for him a whole new way to view his purpose. And that for him was hiking the good hike means using his platform and hiking for mental health awareness, for mental health education. And he really just found himself through hiking.
Sure.
It's a beautiful, beautiful story, really.
Well,
and he's doing very well. So I'm sorry I didn't give the proper answer.
I think he started at the beginning of July, didn't he? Start at the beginning of July.
July 1st.
Right.
And he is now hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. He started July 1st, so he is on day, I guess, 9. And we get regular, updates from him via social media. So far, he's had pretty good connection. So he's been able to post videos and beautiful pictures on his Instagram and Facebook, which we then are posting on our Instagram and Facebook. And he's just reveling being back in the mountains and being back on the trail. He loves it.
And has he articulated to you what he got out of the Appalachian Trail hike in terms of his mental stability?
Oh, I think it completely reversed for him, if that's the right word. I would say it enabled him to recover. He was at that point having suicidal ideations and really had hit a bottom in terms of his mental health. His depression was very bad. And I don't want to, speak too much about his personal state of mental health, but let's just say he did not want to live anymore.
Sure. And that was clear, by the way. Yes. That was clear because the video I watched of him, he's very open about the issues he's had in the past. So what is the Youth Mental Health Project and why are you involved with it? In fact, before we talk about the project, why don't you define what youth mental health actually means? I'm not sure, there are things that Jesse said in that conversation that I heard that I didn't even know they were part of the overall label. So what exactly does it encompass? Yeah. Oh,
there are so many questions in there. So let me see how I can answer some of them. No, they're all amazing questions. So I'm involved in the Youth Mental Health Project. Let me back up. I created and founded the Youth Mental Health Project, which is a national 501c3 nonprofit organization. Sure. And our mission is to educate, empower, and support families to better understand and care for the mental health of our young people. And the reason I created that is that I have my own personal story. I'm the mother of 3 sons, and my middle son, at a very, very young age, was diagnosed with anxiety and depression. He was hospitalized by the time and suicidal by the time he was 10 years old. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and really struggled as a child. And at the time, I didn't know that children could have those problems, right? I mean, why would a child from a perfectly happy home, with no apparent reason, want to not live anymore? It made no sense to me. And so I became very involved in seeking treatment for him. I discovered how common it is. 1 out of 5 kids in our country prior to COVID struggle with a diagnosable mental health disorder. I didn't know that was a thing. And what I came to discover is the enormous stigma and shame and blame around mental health in general, but particularly around children's mental health, really prevented people from getting the help that they need. It prevents parents from knowing what to look for. It prevents teachers from knowing what to look for. Half of all lifetime cases of mental health disorders start before the age of 14 years old. And that was something I didn't know. Yeah. We're talking about millions and millions of children, again, before COVID. Now, the sad but silver lining of COVID is we are starting to talk more about our youth and their mental health. But prior to COVID, we really were not. And so we created this organization to bring light to that and to support families whose kids are struggling. Because if you feel you're the only one, there's no one around you, you're the only parent who has a child who's depressed or who has a mood disorder, you tend to isolate. And that causes parents to delay seeking treatment. It takes an average of 10 years from the onset of a mental health disorder, of symptom, before you get the proper diagnosis and treatment. That's 10 years in the life of a child before they're getting the treatment that they need. And so our whole mission is to change that. Right? We have to stop being a world of crisis intervention and start thinking about early intervention and prevention. And so that's a little bit about how I got involved in the movement. And when Jesse was out, on the ACT, no, wait, that's not right. The Appalachian Trail, I don't think I'm saying it right. In his first major hike that he did, and he discovered,
don't shoot your credibility down.
Yeah, exactly. Away. Wait, I told you I'm not a professional hiker. That he discovered the immense mental health benefits of hiking and wanted to share his story with the world. I'm a huge believer in personal storytelling. If we all just shared the truth and spoke openly about our experiences, we could change all of this dynamic about being, not being able to get help because we're too afraid to talk about it, right? And so that's what's been so incredible, that he had this amazing recovery from a very serious mental health problem that was life-threatening because of his hiking. And then now what he's doing is he's taking that story and he's turning it into a movement to show people that we can use the power of our own stories to make a difference in the world. And for him, what he realizes, even though he's not a youth right now, he's young compared to you and me, but
he's about 40.
He's about 40, right? Yeah. So he's young for us, but he's not young. He's not a youth, but he understands that if we don't help our young people and try to move towards early intervention and prevention, then we are never going to change the horrible statistics that we are seeing. Mental health is an epidemic right now. Yes.
Well, you've actually, this is unusual for me, so I like staying in order of my questions. But I'm going to jump. It's okay. I'm going to jump ahead to one of them. I want to ask. As you know, this is a hiking show, and I'd like to continue the parallels that could be drawn between the curative powers of the outdoors and mental health. Is there any data to support a general correlation? And if there isn't any data, is anecdotal evidence our only way forward?
I think both. There is. There has been research, which I can send you links to. I can't quote them off the top of my head, but there has been research about two things. One is specifically, I think there was a research study done about hiking and its positive benefits for emotional and mental well-being. That has been studied and in fact has been proven that hiking improves your emotional and mental well-being, and being in nature also.
I think it's the being in nature as much as anything else. But
there are two studies, and I think they're separate studies, so that are showing the same kind of result. But yes.
But because I asked that because I met many people on the trail who were clearly suffering within themselves. Because one of the things about hiking, especially at night when you all settle down and you sit around a table and you chat quietly while others are trying to get to sleep at about 7 p.m, you talk about issues more openly you would normally talk about issues. And nearly all of them felt that they'd improved immeasurably by their experience on the trail. Yet intuitively, this is my dumb Brit sensibilities, I'd have thought that the opportunity to be lost in your thoughts for hours would have been detrimental for some people. Do you think there's a balance to be struck, or is this thing of, do you sort things out in your mind, or is nature just having this calming effect upon you, do you think?
You know, I would love to know the answer to that. And I'm not a scientist, but I agree with you anecdotally. You know, we have certainly heard and we know intuitively that, but there are studies that show things like, you know, pet therapy, animals, nature, movement, exercise, endorphins, all of that. Exercise is one of the biggest preventative factors in terms of when we talk about early intervention and prevention of maintaining wellness, and that's true physical wellness as well as mental wellness, right? So those all have been proven to a certain degree. We haven't focused as much on our physical wellness as a culture as we have we haven't focused as much on our mental wellness as a culture as we have on our physical wellness. But we are starting to see research come out to prove that. But yes, we know intuitively how that makes us feel when we are eating well and moving and out, you know, in nature. So
what do you mean eating well? I've been on a hike. Trust me, I ate 6 Snickers a day, a jar of peanut butter. That isn't eating well.
You need, but that's what you kind of need on a hike. So I did take, I don't know if it really counts, but I did walk El Camino de Santiago. I did 7 days on that trail. I joined, actually, it's interesting, my older son and his now wife. They were actually in the earthquake in Nepal in, what year was that? I've lost track, but the big earthquake.
They've had a few.
The big one that happened, I think it was, I'm not going to say the right year. Okay. It was about 4 years ago, perhaps. Mm-hmm. And it was very traumatic. And they left, when they left Nepal, they decided to do the El Camino. From the French Alps all the way to the end. It took them 30 days. And I joined them during 7 of those days. And they had gone through very serious trauma in Nepal. And I, as a mother, it took us 10 days to evacuate them from that earthquake. That was an incredibly stressful thing. And my middle son had been sick for a long time with his own mental health issues. And I found that even those 7 days was so incredible. And they were ahead of me most of the time, but we were walking with our backpacks and it was so spiritual and calming. So as to the question of, don't you just spin around in your head? You know, certainly when you struggle with an anxiety or plenty of other mental health disorders, you know, perseverating negative thoughts in your head is part of being symptomatic. And you would think when you're alone that would exacerbate it. But I think you're not somehow alone when you're on a trail, even if you're alone. I don't know what that means exactly, and the hikers listening would understand this more than I do, but I did not. I was alone, and I didn't feel alone in my head. I felt spiritually connected somehow to everything around me.
I did the Camino as well in 2018, and I think that it's there's not a spiritual side to me, but I think it's communing with nature, being out there, looking. And even the Camino isn't terribly spectacular, but it's a beautiful spot to be. And communing with nature while you're walking along allows you to process those thoughts, perhaps in a more conducive way, because you're in such beautiful surroundings. And I think that for it. Now, just want to get back to Jesse for a moment. Yeah. What is he? You know, he's doing hike the good hike. What is he doing out there to spread the word? Is he meeting people, or is he trying to put together meetups, or is he just doing the hike and just talking to people along the way?
Well, I think first of all, we are aiding him as well as his sponsors in terms of his social media presence. And when he's trying to talk about the hike, talk about his story, share a story, and share some educational tidbits along the way through his social media platform, through our social media platform. But yes, when he is out there, he's not only caring for his own mental health, but along the way, the people he meets, he's speaking with them, he's sharing his personal story. He's probably, I'm imagining, gathering other personal stories from fellow hikers. I haven't seen that yet. He's, because it's only been, I think it's day 9. He is creating videos, and when he's in a town where he can get them to us, right?
Yeah,
I mean, then he'll be sharing those with us, and we'll be able to.
It's not straightforward as people think.
No, exactly. Like, oh, well, it's so funny because people on our team were like, well, okay, well, every Thursday, maybe you could X, Y, and Z. And he laughed. He's like, that's not really how it's going to work. And from my short little time on El Camino, I know you just, as we said before with the flood, you don't know what's going to happen on the trail. You can't predict. And so that's even better. As he explores both himself and the hike, and he's never done the PCT before, and he engages with people along the way, we're going to be seeing that through his videos, through his commentary, through his photos. And I think it's really inspirational to be part of that. And of course, in addition to raising awareness and trying to educate people along the way, his goal is to fundraise.
Sure, of course.
I mean, as we all know, mental health is so poorly funded, mental health care of any kind. And the services that our organization provides for communities and families are particularly now is quite essential. So we're very grateful that he's chosen our organization to campaign for, which is very exciting for us.
I want to pick up on something you said. You said and once again, this may be my total ignorance, and I'm fully aware that often happens. But I'm curious. You said he's working on himself. I'm kind of dreading asking this question because I didn't write it down. Is this curable or is it just manageable? Because you said it helped him and it made him better and so on. Mm-hmm. Or is he managing himself, or is this a thing you continually manage throughout your life?
Well, so let's get back to what is mental health anyway, which you did ask me.
By the way, the impromptu questions are always the most dangerous.
No, you know what? That's an excellent question, and it gets right to the heart of what is mental health anyway. It gets right to the heart of this topic. People are afraid to talk about mental health or ask these questions because the term mental health seems so scary. Right. And so we tiptoe around it just like you do. Yeah. It's a perfect example of how we're culturally conditioned as a society to tip around it because it's uncomfortable. So my mission is to make it as comfortable as possible. And here's what I want to tell you and your listeners so that you can be more comfortable with the term mental health and asking questions around it. We all have mental health. Mental health isn't binary. It's on a continuum. Sometimes we're well and sometimes we're not. And it's just like physical health. Physical health lies on a continuum, right? Sometimes we're really healthy and we're ready for that hike, and other times we're not. We broke our leg or, we have the flu or things happen. And mental health is exactly the same way. We just don't understand it that way. We have been culturally conditioned to believe that mental illness is on one side, and once you have a diagnosis, you have a mental illness and that's it for the rest of your life. Or you don't have a mental illness and you're perfectly fine on the other side. And the truth is, mental health is not binary in that way. So what I mean by that is we ebb and flow in our mental health. Taking care of our mental health for all of us is different every day. And we should always be paying attention to that and managing our mental health the same way we manage our physical health, right? So that should be a never-ending human thing where we try to stay healthy. It's part of our overall health. Now, that does make a lot of sense, right?
Actually, to me.
But
which, if it makes sense to me, it makes sense to anybody.
Well, it's a very logical thing. We've just been culturally conditioned to not think of it that way. And so people think, well, if you have a diagnosis, let's say bipolar disorder or a very serious major depressive disorder or schizophrenia, that, okay, if you have those diagnoses, then you must have a mental illness. And I would like to tell you that's not actually correct. So illness in life is about functioning, whether it's physical or mental. You know, if you're physically ill and you can't hike, right, then you're sick and you're ill and you're not functioning as well as you want to function, and you've got to figure out what to do about managing that. There are physical problems that people have that they don't recover from. You know, cancer, I'm a cancer survivor, and I was very, very ill. And luckily I survived that and I recovered from it. But there are people who don't. And that's just the fact.
Sure.
Having the diagnosis of cancer in itself isn't what determines my state of health, right? Just because I had cancer doesn't mean that I'm not currently healthy. So I like people to understand, like diabetes also, that you can have a physical medical condition that you manage. And I bet you there are plenty of hikers who are healthy enough to hike and functioning well in the world who manage physical medical conditions, whether that's diabetes or asthma or allergies or whatever, but you hike anyway. So do you consider yourself ill if you're a strong, healthy hiker, but you have a physical health diagnosis? No, you don't, right? So mental health is the same. Just because you have a diagnosis doesn't mean you're ill. You can learn to manage most mental health conditions and become healthy and live a healthy life. Now, it could mean you have to learn how to manage it forever. It could mean some people have temporary, just like physical health conditions. You have a temporary.
Just have to pay attention to things,
right? Yeah, or like the flu, which does go away. Some anxiety disorders can be cured and go away. Sometimes a mental health condition can be due to a period, a time in your life. Right, that's just a bad time in your life, and you get triggered, and you end up in a bad state. And then there are people who have a lifetime disorder that they do have to manage. Now, I'm not suggesting that there aren't people who live with serious mental illness every day, because there are. And I'm also not suggesting that all mental health disorders are manageable and curable always. Sure. But that would be silly, because we don't expect all physical health conditions to be curable and always manageable. There are people who live with physical disabilities that they cannot function well in the world. So my whole mission is to have everyone understand mental health the same way and learn how to strengthen our mental health the way we learn how to strengthen our physical health, and learn how to care for it, and then learn how to notice when symptoms are interfering so that we know we need help, just like we know if we have a fever, right?
Right. So, well, it seems to me, in my very non-factual, anecdotal sort of way, that identifying the issue is at the core of doing something about it. Mm-hmm. We hear so many times of a shooting and the mental health issues of the perpetrator. How easy is it to recognise the warning signs? And is your organisation offering practical steps to help identify those warning signs?
Absolutely and absolutely. So it is very difficult to know what the warning signs are because we don't talk about it. The big thing is if we as a culture refuse to talk about mental health, we will never learn what the symptoms are. So again, getting back to early intervention and prevention, it reminds me again of breast cancer. So back in the day, before, when we were so ashamed, and you're old enough as I am to remember when cancer was the C word, way before way before pink ribbons exploded, people were dying of
my mother got breast cancer, had a double mastectomy when she was 46 years of age. So
wow.
So
I'm very aware of that. You know all about it. And back in the day, we didn't know to get mammograms or about self-exams. And we didn't have those early intervention strategies. I mean, I'm alive today because I got regular mammograms, and generations ago that just never would have happened. I wouldn't have been alive. So, so we learned through public health campaigns and erasing the stigma against breast cancer, we learned how to recognize when we needed to get help. So the first thing is that we need to erase the stigma. We need to start talking openly and understanding that mental health isn't something scary to talk about. And then we can move forward just as a culture to understanding what symptoms look like. So as I said, when my children were young, because I didn't know and the teachers didn't know and the pediatricians didn't know what the symptoms were, his behaviors were mistaken for other problems, like parenting problems. I was a bad parent, right? Or all of his physical symptoms, ulcers, migraines, all these other symptoms he had that were physical in nature, no one recognized were actually part of an underlying mental health problem because we didn't talk about it. So step one, we need to talk about it openly, honestly, without shame. Step two, when you start talking about it, we need to learn what are the signs and symptoms. And to your question, our organization has developed free educational downloadable materials all on our website, which is ymhproject.org.
I'll put that in the show notes.
There you go. Thank you. Where you can download this information that you can learn how to recognize, early warning signs. What's appropriate behavior or thoughts or feelings, at different ages versus what are signs of concern. And so it's tricky because mental health issues are invisible in so many ways. And we are so used to just feeling like, well, I should be able to control my thoughts and feelings and behaviors, or the child should be able to control it. So we blame ourselves because we can't control it. And that's, we wouldn't do that with a physical, condition, but we do that with a mental. So we don't recognize it. And you're right. Self-awareness, being able to recognize, wait a minute, maybe this isn't my fault. Maybe it's not my parents' fault. Maybe maybe. So the definition of mental health, maybe this is really my brain is not working right. Our brain is the most complicated organ we have, and it controls everything we do. It controls not only our body movements, but our thoughts, our feelings, and behaviors. Mental health is defined as a state of emotional, psychological, and social well-being that impacts the way we think, feel, and behave. It's just a state of being. And our behaviors and our thoughts and our feelings are what signal the state of mental health we're in, right? So if we are having intrusive suicidal thoughts, if our emotions are dysregulated, if our behaviors are risky and erratic, and I'm simplifying it, but those are warning signs that perhaps you are struggling with your mental health. It doesn't mean, oh, scary, you have a mental illness now. It means maybe I'm struggling with my mental health, and this is an actual medical problem I need to seek help for.
Right.
Right.
Well, it's, you mentioned earlier on the figures prior to COVID. And I would imagine if there were at all a silver lining to COVID, I can't think that there are many, but certainly something we've all heard of more is mental health, and certainly mental health in youngsters because of COVID, being stuck indoors, not seeing their friends. So hopefully that's in some ways brought it, at least the conversation is on the table. Whether or not it gets funding is another thing entirely. It should do, but it probably won't be, because I think partially because it isn't as recognizable as a physical condition. Right. That's perhaps one of the problems. Yes. So if there's one thing our hiking listeners can take away from this, apart from you wanting them to donate to Jesse, of course.
And support him.
And support him.
Not only financially, but let's follow him and support him. I'll put his YouTube. All that great stuff.
Links up.
Hikers need each other to support each other, right? Yeah.
So, what would you want people to take away from this? If you can boil it down to one simple message that people can just go away and think about?
I think the important thing to remember is we all have mental health. And this isn't a topic that's only about people who have an illness, that we all have varying degrees of mental health. And it's important to talk about it, be open about it, be willing to seek help when you need it. And knowledge is power. The more you learn about mental health, the easier it becomes to talk about, and then the easier it becomes to care for. And we as a culture are not going to fund and support early intervention and prevention, or even just basic mental health care, until we understand that very basic concept that we all have mental health and we're all in this together. And so that to me is the most important message out there.
Okay. Well, look, I'm so glad that Barbara reached out to me and that you could come on the show, because it is an important topic. And I'm not apologising to any of my listeners that we didn't talk much about hiking, but that's okay. because I am at some stage going to get Jesse to come on the show and talk about his hike in the context of what he's doing as well. So I appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks so much.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. And thank you to all the hikers out there, because I do think, back to hiking, it is such a meaningful way to maintain good mental health. And I encourage everybody to have some kind of hiking in their life. I know I'm not an expert, but I do enjoy my hiking on weekends. But Jesse's inspired me to try to do more. So thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Bye then.
Bye.
Now, I'm probably exposing to you all how dumb I actually am, but I've never looked at mental health in a way that Randi described it. She really taught me a lot and made me think about what it must be like to be facing demons, I guess. Sadly, of course, it's all about money. And with politicians these days, on both sides, being unable to agree that Sunday follows Saturday, then it's likely that the funding won't be there. So if you think that Randi and then Jesse next week have highlighted something you'd like to support, then click on the link in the show notes and you'll be able to directly support Jesse's hike. So that's it for this week. Make sure that you're back next Thursday and we're going to hear from Jesse. So as I always say, I'll see you next week.